Hello potential friends and adventurers, I'm Em, and today we are going to talk about how to run the most comfortable adventure. Welcome to the DM table. Now, what we're going to do here is separate the approach in two different categories. To run a comfortable adventure, you want to depict the atmosphere, and atmosphere varies from campaign to campaign. Sometimes there is a challenge-filled campaign surrounded by dark corners of the world and opposition that's not so mild towards the players. And in these cases, the brightness and the comfortableness is like a pocket of warmth, occasionally intersecting with the journey, maybe even quite frequently, and this results in quite a comfortable campaign. Now, in another type of campaign, everything is shiny and sun-filled, things are bright and jolly, or they may be serious but they're still wondrous, and everything is sort of inviting to the player to explore and enjoy. And here, the comfortableness is described over time, but with sort of pockets of darkness in opposition that sort of interject and intersect the journey of the player. So, having these two, we now want to do a different thing than the usual. A thing that happens frequently with these campaigns of the more pressuring kind is where we have a description, say, of a sword, where we have sword that was inured in mud for years and now is rust-bitten and its edge is dull and it barely functions, but it's a sword and it's still sturdy along the shaft, and therefore it will serve the purpose. Now, this is a good description and it will serve you well, but if this is done for all things all the time, the player won't really feel the warmth that can come from finding such an object, as opposed to having it occasionally, but also having frequently the descriptions that lead into the warmth pocket atmosphere by themselves, even from the get-go. Along the lines of, this sword seems to have perhaps once served a descendant of a noble house. It has quite an intricate pattern along the blade as well as the guard. It seems quite functional and well balanced, and it was once a wonder to behold, albeit now its silvering has fallen off and its edge is a bit dull from the rust. However, it's quite a serviceable weapon and a fortune to be found. Maybe you see what I did there? Basically, the method is following. You list positive traits that would be well beloved by the players upon hearing them, and then you list a but that is not too severe, and sort of tone it down, then rejoice about the result. Now, this can be done even better than I did just now, but you probably get the point. This isn't something that's useful just for the items. It's not something just for found treasure or circumstances and so on. It's something that should be used as a method of injecting these pockets of warmth throughout all of your narrative. Large scale and small scale. Campaign events and everyday events. All of these lead to that purpose of feeling intrinsic joy upon discovering yet another piece of how to either enjoy the world or better it. How to fight the good fight somewhat better the next day, or the next minute, or the next second. This can be done even in action. But as with everything, balance is a good thing. Bear in mind that this is useful for all narrative arts, as it says in the banner, whether you're a writer, game maker, DM. Here's how description would do this in a more complexer manner, whilst doing some exposition about the world and the player's place in it. You see a girl, your childhood friend, dressed similarly as you are, though with quite a stylish bearing, even though she's dressed in burlap rags, replacing clothes with help of a bit of rope. She doesn't seem to mind though, and has a bright and cheerful attitude, which warmth, both a warm tone of skin and her cheery attitude, give you joy every time you see her, as is the case this morning. You and her have, alongside your other friends, never considered yourselves the poor class so much as the more active and on your feet class. People that get around more and are in more of the happenings and adventures more physically. You respected the scholars and people who know more about the world outside of the city, but within you would consider yourselves the real adventure-like kind of the place, going everywhere and doing everything. Now, I would go on a bit more, but you might be seeing how that looks here. Hopefully it wasn't too much. As for the bright world category of such descriptions, we almost want to do the other way, the opposite way, just, well, you'll see how that's built. When you have a very bright and inviting world in almost every detail, how you position it is to list out positive traits as everyday thing, and then intrigue the player with the trait that's taking away seemingly from the experience in a, however, potentially interesting and inviting way, if possible. Of course, balance is good in all things, so remember in both cases to apply some. How this would potentially look is you grew up in the boarding school alongside the boy, and whilst he is a strikingly beautiful boy to your eye, and you have been growing together and getting along fine in the presence of your other friends, when the two of you are alone, it seems almost as if his teasing is designed to get on your nerves. Quite a bit, even. See? It can be sort of a jolly detriment in a way. Or a mystery. Remember that not everything is exactly equivalent to these examples. I'm just trying to convey a technique here. Now, taking this all into consideration, now we should think about when to strike within the story. As to what I'm referring to in striking within the story, that would be sort of, you probably sensed it, when to go more rough in either example. Well, think about it like this. If you're more of a beginner, and mind you, for few years everybody is, you shouldn't be too eager to hit the trigger. These things come with time, and as I say in many other occasions, you will find what the players don't really like, even accidentally, all of the time. As long as these things are minor though, campaign will survive and you won't need to work to make them. They'll just occur as normal situations that differences of opinion create between people, both your players amongst themselves and especially between the players and the people who live in the world you're describing to them. So those accidental differences of opinion will create your ground for what is the actual negative thing in your world. You're supposed to try to polish the world to the best of your ability without trying to overly ham-fistedly shove in the player's face what is it that is negative to the situation at hand, and this will be a thing anyways, where even if you try to simulate an interesting world, as long as there's some dynamic that is interesting, you're almost certain to find some sort of disagreement amongst your players with some piece of your dynamic that you found. And once this happens, play along. Just play along and try to even smooth it out behind the scenes, because depending on how harshly the players react, you might be even having an overboard situation without you intending to do it. So as such, don't be overly eager to inflict heavy-handedly, but once in a while, try to sort of have something that stirs the beliefs. Then you can do a old bait and switch and everything is fine. Except you can do a double bait and switch and not everything is actually fine and things were actually serious, but they were serious in a seriouser manner that is not harder, but it was intricater, and players should have maybe been smarter and thinking about that already, even though this doesn't have necessarily any detriments to them from the previous playing. It's sort of like false second revelation, except it's real. But then eventually you can either do a heroic retake of the situation by the party, or you can do a triple bait and switch where actually there were things that could be done to prevent further situation from escalating and things weren't as apocalyptic as they seemed at the time, and then the celebration is in order. Except the next arc comes along. You can see how this will keep them at the edge of their seats quite a bit. Now, of course, I don't tend to plan too much for this, it just sort of builds on its own if you follow the instructions, I suppose. Or you have done this naturally, perhaps. I would love to hear about it, by the way, if you did. As to when to manually pull the trigger, so to speak, I guess now that you've heard all the previous, you'll sort of grow the feeling for it eventually. And then, well, as goes the plot. But remember, everybody starts sort of green with writing, very green. And then if you escalate too early and too much, it just seems very mature to everybody concerned, and later to yourself when you look back and cringe, as they say. Additionally, and really centrally, to create such a bright and positive campaign, whether as pockets in the darkness or as a bright and glorious sun across all of the fields, it's your task to describe as to benefit the senses of your players. Their sight, of course, but their taste, their touch, their comfort in all kinds. Basically, all of the time, there are moments where players don't necessarily do it, or they will, and it's up to you to describe how they smell the roses. Of course, it's more than floral speech. What you probably would need to do is deliver short yet powerful descriptions that stir the sense in question. For example, smell, like the smell of cocoa emanates in the morning, or the smell of flowers is somewhat fresh and shrill, but also opening to the mind and eyes as well as the nose, leading into the bright fields on such a chill morning. These can all work to further the atmosphere, to bring more of this comfortable feeling that then players will use to share amongst themselves and with the world, and then they'll start going on comfy side quests and enjoying themselves, and there you go, everything's done. As for what else can be done, well, if you noticed, I have here extremely new channel, and therefore I'll have the time to answer all of your questions. I would like to answer all of your questions, so post comments to me, tell me stories, tell me how did it work, did it go well, how did you feel, how did your players feel. Let's talk about it, also bring some questions. In fact, I'll make from best and longest topics some episodes in the future, so we can enjoy them together in a more interactive way, and I'll have more what's best for you in mind when I'm making these. Well, I wish you luck, as usual, and if you thought this was unique adventure, then maybe you can spare a click. See you next week. Bye.